In this lesson, we're going to take a look at the object properties and how they can be adjusted to control the way that an object is actually going to render. Alright, so here's our scene that we're going to be working with, pretty much the same scene that we've been working with up to this point. Now, one thing that we do have the ability to control within 3ds Max is the render options of any particular object. So we can tell any object to either be invisible to the camera or to maybe not cast shadows or be invisible to reflections. Whatever the case may be, we have a tremendous amount of control on a per object basis. So to access this area, what we need to do is just first select the piece of geometry that we're going to work with, and then a quick and easy way is to just right-click on that object to access your quad menu, and then down in this little lower corner of the transform, go to Object Properties. Alright, so for the object that we have selected, we have the ability to maybe disable its render flag, so that way, once that's turned off, this object should become completely transparent and not even be calculated in the render. Alright, and there we go. It's really almost as if that piece of geometry is not even there. So this can be especially useful for things like rigging up your characters. If you have control objects and pieces of geometry that you don't necessarily want to be rendered on your control rig, you can just turn off their render flag, and now those objects will be completely invisible. Alright, now we also do have other levels of control as far as this goes, so if I turn the render back on, we can tell it to perhaps be invisible to the camera. Now what that should do is tell this object to pretty much be invisible to the camera, but it'll still cast shadows and still be visible in reflections and things like that. Alright, you can see that is exactly what we have. This object is not really visible to the camera as far as actually letting the geometry be seen, but its effect can definitely be seen as far as the shadows, and if we had reflections on any of this geometry, we would even be able to see the reflections of this non-existent piece of geometry. So really a very high level of control that we have as far as being able to adjust all these different parameters of each individual object. So we can maybe tell it to not cast shadows. Alright, and now you can see that this piece of geometry is now completely visible, except now there are no shadows being cast by that particular object, and there are no shadows being cast on the pens from this piece of geometry. So this is a good example of if you had something clear like a window that you absolutely did not want any shadows to interact with, but you did want it to be visible as far as being able to see reflections and see some refractions. This is a perfect example of where you could use some of these different object properties. Now the nice thing is that we can actually adjust this on multiple objects simultaneously. So if I select multiple objects, take a look at the object properties, we can tell maybe all of these objects to cast shadows, but not be visible to the camera. Alright, and there we go. Now we have these objects that are not visible in the scene, but we still get these nice, kind of soft shadows. Alright, so a tremendous amount of flexibility that is accessible to us through these object properties. And beyond just the simple render flags, we also have control over things like mental ray and other advanced lighting properties. So if I go back to the object properties, we also have, if we go into the mental ray tab, we have the ability to tell an object to either be ignored by final gather rays, to be included in global illumination or excluded, and so on and so forth. And again, these are really only applicable to mental ray. And we can also include or make sure we exclude any objects from any advanced light calculations, which we'll talk about a little bit later in this training. Right, so that's a look at these object properties and some of the controls that they will give us over our individual pieces of geometry.